My talk is called F words. The first one I want to mention is feedback. I got some great feedback on Alan's talk last week. I understand it was just really top notch. It's spoken from the heart. And thank you, Alan, very much for doing that. F words. As you know, Alan talked last week on fear. That seems to be a topic in many of our minds, and I guess some of the other talks. I think Melanie did a talk that was sort of not fear-based, but based on the idea of fear and how to overcome it, and so forth. And Alan's was too. One of the F words I think that's very important in our life is fear. So I just, even though they mentioned it, I just want to just cover it briefly myself. Fear. Fear has a couple or three acronyms, as many of you know. Fear, F-E-A-R. False events appearing real. Forget everything and run. That's another one. And there are others as well. I think instead of false events, I've always listened to that and I thought, well, these are happening. They're not false. But what's happening is that I'm fantasizing on the event and I give it an appearance that makes it real for me, whatever it is in my life. That's a very unity way of looking at fear and a unity way of looking at life itself. What we've got going on there is we've got ourselves living the law of mind action. The law of mind action being thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. So if you're living in a life where fear is present for you a lot, then of course everything that comes up for you in your life, you're going to look at that and you're going to say, I knew it would happen. And we sort of draw it to ourselves. It appears as though we're drawing it to ourselves. What's actually happening is it's just an event. It's neutral. There's nothing to fear there whatsoever. As President Roosevelt said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, getting into that state of fear. But once you're there, then all the events that happen get interpreted through that fear filter. And that's another F word. Filters. We all have them in our minds. We have them and we aren't even aware that everything that appears to us has to go through our little special filters first before we allow it into our life. And at that filter point, we either reject it or accept it, whatever it might be in life. We see something occur, we label it, it goes through our filter, and we either accept it at that point or our filter rejects it and sends it out somewhere else. That's how fear is able to control such a great part of what's going on for us. What happens as soon as we get into this state of fear place, the reptilian mind goes into that fight or flight. It immediately goes there. For a lot of men, as soon as we have something that occurs in our lives that causes us any kind of fear, we want to fight. We want to take it on, whatever it is, and we want to push up against it, contend with it. The minute we do that, we have made all the possibilities in our life very finite. We have made something of this or that, an acceptance or the other, immediately. And that's where we stay. We stay in that state. I really don't like it when I hear a politician tell me that they're going to fight for me. I don't want them to fight for me. I want them to advocate for me. I want them to represent me. I want them to say that. I don't want them to say, if you elect me and I get up there, I'll fight for your causes, and this is what they are. I understand what they mean, but I really would like for them to quit using that term. Because a fight means contention. We've got enough of that going on right now. I mean, they've created it. They've created it within themselves. They are fighting. Two sides fighting with one another, and nothing's getting done. Wouldn't it be great to say, when I get up there, I'll do everything I can to communicate with the other side and to advocate this position as best I can to those who will listen, and we will get something done. Wow. Whoever that says that, they've got my vote right off the bat. The other thing is the flight mechanism that we use. Flight can happen in a couple of ways. That forget everything and run, that can happen for us right now when we see something and we can just avoid it. I don't want to talk about that. You all know this to be true. At some point, we have to sit down with our spouse or our significant other or our attorney or somebody and talk about the plans we're going to make for when we make our transition. How many of you have ever gotten into that place and said, you know, I need to sit down and talk with you about this, and your partner says, I don't want to talk about that right now. Let's don't talk about that. Let's just enjoy life. Let's do that. And you do that, and you go on, and you go on, and finally the day comes when suddenly it's upon you, and you made your transition. And the other person is sitting back saying, why didn't I listen to him or her? I don't know where our insurance policies are. I don't know what his plans are for this or that, the other. I don't know. We never talked about it. Why? Because we spent that time in flight, trying to stay away from it, trying to avoid it at every cost. Flight. Forget everything and run. That's something that doesn't serve us well in any way that we look at it. Now, yes, if someone is coming to fight you, you might want, and you're not ready for that fight, or you know that they could actually harm you physically, of course you want to move on. You know, there are 3 answers in life. Yes, no, I gotta go. Those are the 3 answers in life, and you get to choose which one of them it is. Yes, oftentimes puts you in that fight situation. No puts you in the fight situation. I gotta go gets you out of it for the moment until cooler heads can prevail and everything can be talked rationally. That's nice. Fear, though, is something that exists in every one of us because we lose touch with who we truly are and we feel separation. I want to talk today about a couple of other words that have F in the beginning of them besides fear. One of them right now that I want to talk about, and I use fight, flight, fix things, so forth. One of them I want to talk about is failure. Failure is it's a perfect time. That reminds me too, when Alan went over there to close that door, I was just getting ready to say something about go within, and I almost said, go within your inner sanctum. With a creaking door. Any of you remember that old show? Okay, so that would be the next thing, failure. What is failure to you? What is failure? You know, businesses, I have been taught that businesses fail for 2 reasons. 2 reasons. Lack of capital and poor management. Those 2 reasons. If you have enough capital, you can sustain yourself with poor management for a long, long time. Just ask the managers of Sears, or the people who manage JCPenney's, or some of the other places that we have seen go on for so long using poor management practices, but deep, deep pockets. And they're going to just burn up all the money, and the mortar and brick buildings are going to stand empty and so forth because of poor judgment on the management of that. That exists in every one of our lives as well, on the micro level, individual level. How many of us have not managed our brick and mortar existence, our home, our physical home, very well? And suddenly one day we look around and there's no visitors. In other words, there's no new thoughts, there's no new feelings, there's nothing within that is new and flowing and constantly moving forth, back and forth, making agreements inside ourselves. It's just the same old way of thinking, the same old way of being, the same old way of doing, and the same old way of acting, even though the world has changed all around us, and we're allowing it to pass us by. When I was a child, I loved sugary things, sweet things. I just loved them. And they were advertised as being, Mom, go out and buy sugar frosted flakes. Mom, go out and buy Sugar Crisp. All these different cereals. At some point, the world shifted. I didn't. I didn't. I still continued to like these things at the detriment of my brick and mortar being. It happened for a long time, until finally I started changing the management. And when the management changed, suddenly everything changed as well for the business of living. It's taken a while. It's taken a long time. It's taken a toll. But it's worth it to make the changes necessary so that the business doesn't fail. And I'm the business of me, and you are the business of you. And we can change that if we do the proper inventory. How many of us aren't sure what's inside here? We're not sure what's on the shelves. We're not sure how long it's been there. We're not sure if it's reached its expiration date. We're not sure about any of that stuff because we don't do enough inner reflecting on that. Socrates said the life that goes without self-reflection is wasted. And it truly is. We can't just continue on and on. Failure is the easiest thing in the world to succeed at. Simply do nothing, and you'll achieve it. It happens for every one of us. Every one of us reached that crossroad in, that fork in the road that Yogi Berra talked about. When you come to the fork in the road, take it. Now, it's true. It's true. When you take it, whichever direction you go is going to lead you somewhere. Let's say the fork isn't just this way or that way on a level field. Let's say it's this way, up or down. One of my favorite writers, Stephen Hart, wrote this, and he said, I came to a place where there was a path going up and a path going down. I decided to choose the path going up. It wasn't long before I realized that this path was arduous and that every blade of grass became like a spear. I wanted to turn around and go back, but I could not. I had to continue on. And finally, when I reached the summit, the view. Each one of us can do that in our lives, but I just remember him saying, each single blade of grass becoming like a spear. This can happen to us in our lives. Fear wants to overtake us and create for us failure. It wants us to take the easy path down. Ours is to continue on the road, continue on, and achieve success. The view. How wonderful. Fear and failure. Two things that seem so negative in our lives. But each one of them helps us reach a destination, a place in our lives where we become a little bit deeper. We become more refined. Our lives take those sort of turns for us. Let's talk about something nice now for a change. There is we call it a book, the book of Job in the Bible. It's actually the story of Job. It's a story that goes far beyond the Bible. It was told by the Babylonians. That's probably where the Hebrew nation got it and included it as part of their wonderful wisdom scriptures. And this story is an absolutely wonderful story. If any of you are familiar with Job, good. You may hear this and it's just old news. Some of you may be hearing it for the first time because Job is a story about each and every one of us. It starts off this way. God is looking down from heaven and watching Job, his special person. Job has a beautiful farm. Everything is going right. All the rain falls at just the right time. He's growing wonderful crops. He has animals that are all fluffy and nice and looking so pretty and so wonderful. He has sons and daughters who absolutely love and adore him and wouldn't think of disobeying him. Everything is just perfect in his life, and he has a wife, maybe more, but he has a wife in there who just takes care of life for him and is always pleasant, and it's just an absolutely wonderful thing. And Job couldn't be happier, and Job loves God, always makes his proper oblations and sacrifices and so forth, and always is there, very, very proper and faithful. So then along comes Satan, and God says, "Oh, Satan, where have you been?" He says, "Oh, wandering to and fro upon the earth." He says, "What is it that you're so interested in?" He says, "I'm interested in my good son Job down here. Isn't he doing well? Isn't he just wonderful? And he loves me so much." Satan says to God, "Well, of course he does. He's got everything. He's got the perfect life. He's probably going to live forever. He's never sick. Everything's just perfect with him. I'd like to make a wager with you, God." And God says, "Okay, what's your wager?" He says, "You take away those things from him. Let's see how much he loves you. I wager that he will curse you. He will abandon you, never love you again." God says, "I'll take that bet. I'll take it." And so God starts removing things. The rain stops. A drought comes. The crops die. Animals get sick and fall over dead. The sons and the daughters turn on him and leave. The wife becomes a nag and just stays on his case all the time. Nothing's happening good for him, including he breaks out in some kind of an illness with boils all over his body, and he's just feeling terrible and just can barely even stand taking a breath. It's so difficult. He is in constant pain and agony, but he never stops loving God. Friends come to him and say to him, "What is it that you have done that has caused God to hate you so much that these things have happened to you? Whatever it is, you better quit doing it." And he says, "I don't know. All I can tell you is that which I have feared the most has come upon me." That's an important phrase right there. That which I have feared the most has come upon me. You see, even though all of this good was happening in his life, deep back in the back of his mind says, "I hope this doesn't stop." And it did. That's what he feared the most, that it would come to an end. It's come upon him. His wife comes to him eventually and says, "You keep saying you love this God. You keep doing these sacrifices. You keep offering prayers. Nothing good is happening for you. Nothing. Why don't you just curse this God? He's not being friendly to you whatsoever." And he says, "I don't know. All I know is that I'm going to stay in this position even if it kills me. I'm going to stay here because I don't blame God for any of this. However this is happening, it's happening to me for a reason. Happening for a reason that is good for my growth and good for God. God has a plan, and I'm still a part of it." So she stops. God turns to Satan and says, "Pay up." He does and disappears, going wandering to and fro upon the earth once more. Now, God restores to him. The rains come back. The crops thrive. The animals are replaced. The children that he had once been on the outs with, come back and ask for his forgiveness, and everything changes in his life. His wife becomes compliant once more. Moves to a little town called Stepford. Everything starts working out once again in his life, and he goes on, and life is good. End of story. And they all lived happily ever after. This story is about faith. This story is about standing in the presence of fear. This is standing in the presence of failure and continuing on, no matter what, to remain constant, to feel like I am not the center of my own universe. I am a part of it, and I will not distance myself whatsoever. I will not fall into a place of pity. I won't do this. I will not see myself as a victim. I won't do this. Yes, I feel victimized, but I'm not a victim. That consciousness does not live within me. I will live through this. God has a greater plan for God's purpose, not mine and mine alone. Once we get to that place, then we overcome fear. Failure becomes a distant memory in our past. Faith becomes something that allows us to hang on even in the presence of that which appears to be hopeless, and we can move on. What's that fourth one? Forgiveness. Jesus tells us this in the scripture. Before you go to the altar to present your offering, in other words, before you dedicate your life and move forward, if you have anything in your consciousness against another, go and reconcile that first. Then bring back your offering. Why? Why would he say such a thing? Because we carry with us the seeds for our own destruction. We carry those seeds with us when we are still apart from and see somebody else as apart from us that deserves our judgment. Once we get to the place where we are reconciled with them once again, this means that we have to practice forgiveness and we have to ask for forgiveness. Now, that can't always happen in every area of our lives. How many of us, our pride, our stance that we've taken for all these years, are able to go to another person and say, you know, the stance that I've held with you, even if it's just I'm not speaking to you anymore, we're done. How many of us carry with us some feelings within ourselves like that with another person, or with ourselves, or with something that we did in our own past that we're unwilling to look at, face, or reconcile? Here's the wonderful news. You know, some of the people that I have recognized that with in my own life, old girlfriends or sisters or brothers or schoolmates or whoever it might be, suddenly a thought will come to me in meditation or driving or whenever I'm mowing the lawn, whenever. Suddenly a thought will come to me and I'll say, and a little story, the little fantasy of what happened there will suddenly drift up into my consciousness. And I will say to myself, oh, from my new or more mature self, I will look at that and I will say, oh, I was wrong. I didn't realize the harm I was causing. I didn't realize at the time my feeling of betrayal towards that person or whatever it might have been, or the inability on my part to tell the truth and accept something that I had done, whatever it might be. How can I forgive that if they have already passed off this plane of existence? I can't go to them. I can't call them on the phone. I can't write them a letter. I can't do anything. What can I do? I can go to where they are and where they've always been. The same center in them is the same center in me. That didn't die. That didn't pass on. I can still go to God. I can go back and find that person in my heart and tell them I'm sorry. Forgive me. I'm ready to accept whatever is necessary for us to be loving once again. When I can do that, even in prayer and meditation, something inside of me just sort of lifts off. You know, when we go to God and we say, God, please forgive me for whatever it was that we think we did, God's answer to us is sort of to say, forgive what? All I saw was love. That can happen in every one of our lives. Every one of us can reach a point in our life where we can feel totally resolved within ourselves. We can reach that point where we say to ourselves, I'm okay. I'm doing the best I know how. And as things are revealed to me in consciousness, I will deal with them in a direct and forthright manner for the good of all concerned. Yes, sometimes it means, as we say, sucking it up, getting to that place where you take that big gulp and you, if you're really fakey like some of us, you text them. If you want to get a little bit stronger, you call them. If not, you make an appointment and have lunch with them or whatever it might be to tell them, you know, when this happened long ago, I didn't handle that well. I'm sorry. Is there anything I can do to make amends for that? You know, most of the time people say, oh, I forgot that a long time ago, or what are you talking about? It didn't affect me. But look at what we've been carrying all this time. That's why we can't present ourselves to the altar. That's why we can't make a full connection, which is what it means. When you're ready to make a full connection, make sure that there's nothing between you and any other person or any other thought or feeling that you might hold within you that's getting in the way. Then the commitment that you make, this presenting yourself at the altar, works. How many of us can do that? Every last one of us who's willing to actually do it. That's the final F. Footwork. We have to do the footwork. Whether it's freeing ourselves in our minds or freeing ourselves in our bodies, whatever it might be, something is required of us. The fantasy must be laid aside. The footwork must be done. We must face directly anything that is keeping us from being our higher selves. If we can do that, we fixed everything that needs to be fixed. We've done it. We're free, and we can let go and let God. God bless.